Beaverhead County, Montana Territory. October 1881. While his neighbors raised timber frames against the coming winter, Lars Ericsson did something that made them question his sanity. He took a pickaxe to a hillside and started digging into the earth itself. "He's building a grave for his family," muttered Thomas Bradley, the settlement's most experienced builder. "Mark my words, they'll freeze before February." But what those Montana pioneers dismissed as madness was actually ancient engineering, refined over centuries in the harshest climates on Earth. What did this Norwegian immigrant understand about thermal mass and earth insulation that American frontier builders had completely overlooked? Before we reveal how Lars Ericsson's insane tunnel home outperformed every conventional cabin in the territory, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. And drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from, because this survival wisdom works anywhere winter bites hard. Subscribe now, and I promise you'll learn frontier engineering techniques that could literally save your life in a grid-down scenario. The afternoon Lars Ericsson announced his construction plan, 17 settlers gathered at Morrison's trading post to hear him out. What they heard sounded like frontier suicide. "I will dig into Anderson Hill," Lars explained in his careful English, rolling out a hand-drawn schematic on the rough-hewn counter. 16 feet deep into the south face. Stone foundation at the entrance, sod roof over the excavation, ventilation shaft through the hillside peak. Thomas Bradley, who'd built 23 cabins across 3 territories, didn't hide his contempt. "You're talking about a dirt hole? Ericsson, a glorified root cellar. Where's your firebox going to draw? How will you keep moisture from rotting everything you own? This isn't Norway. Montana winter will kill you deader than a doornail." The other men nodded. They'd spent years perfecting the art of the frontier cabin. Tight chinked logs, stone chimneys, shake roofs. Every successful homestead followed the same proven formula. Lars Ericsson was proposing something that sounded primitive, backwards, possibly fatal. "My grandfather lived in a gam in Finnmark," Lars said quietly. 70 kilometers north of Alta, winter temperatures reached 40 below. His home was cut into the earth. "My family survived there for 4 generations." "This ain't Finnmark," Bradley shot back. "And your grandfather ain't here to dig you out when that hillside collapses on your wife and children." But Lars had already purchased the hillside claim. The deed was recorded. And by the first week of November 1881, with snow already dusting the peaks, he was 20 feet into Anderson Hill with nothing to show but a dark hole and a growing pile of excavated clay. Sarah Ericsson, his wife, fielded the concerned visits. "He knows what he's doing," she told the women who came bearing warnings disguised as charity. But even Sarah, watching their savings disappear into that hillside, felt doubt creeping in during the long November nights. What Lars Ericsson was building defied every principle of frontier construction his neighbors understood. But it followed principles far older, principles written into the earth itself. He excavated 16 feet into the hillside at a slight upward angle, creating a tunnel 22 feet long and 12 feet wide. The entry faced precisely southeast, calculated to catch the low winter sun while avoiding the prevailing northwest winds that screamed down from the Bitterroot Range. At the entrance, Lars constructed a foundation of stacked sandstone, each piece selected for its flat, bearing surface. The stone wall extended 18 inches into the earth on both sides, creating a thermal break between the outside air and the excavated interior. The doorframe itself was set back 4 feet from the exterior wall, creating an entry vestibule that trapped cold air before it could penetrate the main chamber. Inside, the tunnel opened into a primary living space, 12 by 14 feet, with an 8-foot ceiling. Lars carved sleeping alcoves directly into the clay walls, 3 separate chambers, each 18 inches deep, that would hold straw-fill mattresses off the main floor. At the far end, he installed a small corner firebox constructed from firebrick he'd hauled from Helena, with a flue pipe that ran horizontally for 6 feet before angling upward through a carefully engineered ventilation shaft. The brilliance lay in what his neighbors couldn't see. At 16 feet of depth, The surrounding Earth maintained a constant temperature of approximately 52 degrees Fahrenheit, 11 degrees Celsius year-round, a thermal battery that neither froze in winter nor overheated in summer. The clay walls, 2 feet thick on all sides, created an insulation barrier with an R value roughly equivalent to 12 inches of modern fiberglass. Lars installed the ventilation shaft at the tunnel's rear, boring upward at a 70-degree angle until it broke through the hillside 28 feet above the living chamber. He lined it with split cedar and fitted a rotating cap at the top, a design borrowed from Norwegian gam that created consistent draft while preventing downdrafts during high winds. By December 15th, with temperatures already dropping below zero, Lars moved his family into the tunnel. They carried in their possessions, hung canvas partitions across the sleeping alcoves, and lit their first fire in the corner stove. The neighbors watched with pity, certain they were witnessing the beginning of a frontier tragedy. Thomas Bradley made his professional assessment on December 18th. He stood in Lars Eriksson's tunnel home for exactly 7 minutes before delivering his verdict at Morrison's trading post that evening. "It's a death trap," Bradley announced to the assembled settlers. "Moisture's already condensing on the walls. There's barely enough draw in that flue to keep a candle lit, let alone a proper fire. The man's got his family sleeping in a damp hole with inadequate ventilation and a firebox that can't possibly heat 1,200 cubic feet of space." The critique carried weight. Bradley wasn't just experienced, he was the closest thing Beaverhead County had to a building authority. When he condemned Lars's design, the community consensus solidified. The Norwegian had made a fatal mistake. "Give it 3 weeks," predicted Samuel Morrison, the trading post owner. "When the deep cold hits, when temperatures drop to 20 below, 30 below, that tunnel's going to be uninhabitable. The moisture alone will make them sick. And if that clay ceiling collapses from frost heave..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The Women's Auxiliary, led by Catherine Bradley, organized a relief plan. They would take in the Eriksson children when, not if, the tunnel home failed. Sarah Eriksson would find refuge with the Morrisons. Lars himself, they figured, would have to swallow his pride and accept that American frontier wisdom had been earned through hard experience, not imported from some frozen Norwegian wasteland. Meanwhile, the Eriksson family settled into their strange new home. Lars added a second canvas layer across the entry vestibule. He banked earth against the exterior stone wall, creating an additional insulation berm. And every evening, he burned a small, carefully managed fire in his corner stove. Never the roaring blazes his neighbors maintained, just a modest flame that his neighbors interpreted as another sign of inadequate heating. "He's rationing wood because he knows it won't help," Bradley told anyone who'd listen. "That tunnel's pulling heat straight into the earth. It's thermal suicide." By January 1st, 1882, the entire settlement had written off Lars Eriksson's tunnel home as an experiment in frontier folly. The only question remaining was how bad things would get before the Norwegian admitted defeat. Then the weather changed everything. January 12th, 1882. The thermometer outside Morrison's trading post read minus 38 degrees Fahrenheit, minus 39 degrees Celsius at dawn. By noon, it had climbed to minus 35 degrees Fahrenheit, minus 37 degrees Celsius, the warmest it would get for the next 11 days. The cold that descended on Beaverhead County that January wasn't just severe. It was the kind of cold that killed livestock in their barns, that froze water buckets solid in kitchens within an hour, that turned exposed skin black with frostbite in under 3 minutes. The kind of cold that made survival a full-time occupation. In the settlement's conventional cabins, families fought desperate battles against the temperature. Thomas Bradley's home, built with double-chinked walls, a massive stone fireplace, and a full season's worth of cordwood stacked inside, required feeding the fire every 45 minutes around the clock. Even then, temperatures inside hovered between 41 degrees Fahrenheit and 48 degrees Fahrenheit, 5 to 9 degrees Celsius, except in the immediate vicinity of the firebox, where it reached a bearable 62 degrees Fahrenheit, 17 degrees Celsius. The Morrison family burned through 8 cords of split pine in those 11 days. The Hendersons, in their slightly smaller cabin, consumed 6.5 cords. Every family measured their survival in diminishing wood piles, in smoke-stung eyes, in the exhaustion of maintaining continuous fires while also caring for livestock and breaking ice for water. Sleep became impossible in shifts longer than the time between feedings. Children huddled 3 and 4 to a bed under every available blanket. Condensation from breathing froze in crystalline patterns on interior walls. Several families moved their sleeping arrangements directly alongside their fireplaces, accepting the smoke in exchange for survivable temperatures. On January 16th, when the temperature hit -42 degrees Fahrenheit, -41 degrees Celsius, the lowest anyone in the settlement could remember, Catherine Bradley made the trek to check on the Erickson family. She expected to find them in crisis, possibly already preparing to evacuate. Hit that like button and subscribe now. What Catherine Bradley discovered at the tunnel home that day changed frontier building across 3 territories. Don't miss what happens next. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, and let's keep this survival wisdom alive. What she found instead made her question everything she thought she understood about winter survival. The tunnel entrance stood partially drifted with snow, but a clear path led to the recessed doorway. Catherine knocked, expecting to interrupt some desperate warming effort. Sarah Erickson opened the door wearing a simple wool dress. No heavy coat, no layer blankets wrapped around her shoulders. "Catherine, come in, please. Coffee's hot." The interior temperature, measured later that day, when Thomas Bradley insisted on personally verifying what his wife reported, read 64 degrees Fahrenheit, 18 degrees Celsius in the main living chamber. The sleeping alcoves, buffered by canvas partitions and body heat, measured 67 degrees Fahrenheit, 19 degrees Celsius. And Lars's corner stove held a fire no larger than what you'd use to brew tea. A modest flame consuming perhaps 1/4 the wood of a conventional heating fire. The Erickson children played on the dirt floor in bare feet. Sarah's bread dough rose on a shelf near the living chamber's center, not requiring placement near the stove. The air was dry, not damp, the ventilation shaft creating a constant, gentle circulation that pulled moisture up and out while drawing fresh air through the carefully designed entry vestibule. "How much wood have you burned?" Catherine asked, her voice hollow with disbelief. Lars gestured to a neat stack along the western wall. 1 1/4 cords since November. I split another half cord outside, but we have not needed it yet. Catherine Bradley did the math. In the same period, her family had consumed nearly 14 cords. The tunnel home was operating at approximately 11% of the fuel consumption while maintaining higher interior temperatures. It was by every measure that mattered impossible, except it was happening. The earth itself was doing the work. By January 20th, when the brutal cold finally broke and temperatures climbed to an almost balmy 12 degrees Fahrenheit, -11 degrees Celsius, Thomas Bradley stood in Lars Erickson's tunnel home with a pencil, paper, and a determination to understand what he'd gotten wrong. The evidence was irrefutable. While Bradley's own cabin had consumed 11.3 cords of firewood during the cold snap, the Erickson family had burned through exactly 1.4 cords, an efficiency ratio of 8-1. More striking was the comfort differential. The tunnel home maintained consistent temperatures between 62 degrees Fahrenheit and 68 degrees Fahrenheit, 17 to 20 degrees Celsius, throughout the crisis, while conventional cabins fluctuated wildly between 38 degrees Fahrenheit near walls and 65 degrees Fahrenheit within 3 feet of roaring fires. But the numbers only told part of the story. The tunnel home's performance represented a fundamental rethinking of heating physics that frontier builders had completely missed. "The earth is your firebox," Lars explained, walking Bradley through the principles his grandfather had taught him in Finnmark. At 16 feet depth, the surrounding clay holds 52 degrees year-round. This is your baseline, not the outside air temperature. My stove does not fight -40-degree air. It raises the temperature from 52 to 68. Only 16 degrees of work. Bradley examined the clay walls, touching them tentatively. They were cool, but not cold, roughly the temperature of a spring cellar. The thermal mass of thousands of cubic feet of earth, all holding steady at that constant 52 degrees Fahrenheit, created a heat battery that small fires could nudge upward, but which massive cold could barely affect. The ventilation shaft, which Bradley had mocked as inadequate, performed a dual function. It drew smoke upward efficiently while creating a gentle circulation pattern that distributed heat evenly throughout the space. The heated air rose, moved along the ceiling, cooled slightly, and descended along the walls. A natural convection current that required no fans, no complicated ductwork, no external energy. The sleeping alcoves, carved directly into the clay, acted as individual thermal chambers. Body heat alone raised their temperature 3 to 5 degrees above the main chamber, and the canvas partitions trapped that warmth while allowing air exchange. It was passive engineering of breathtaking efficiency. The moisture, Bradley said, still searching for flaws. You said yourself the walls would condense. In autumn, yes, when the warm air met cool earth. But now, in deep winter, the earth is warmer than the outside air. The moisture moves outward into the frozen soil. The ventilation shaft pulls it away before it accumulates. In spring, for 3 weeks, we will have condensation again as the cycle reverses. We wipe the walls daily. A small price. Within 6 weeks of the cold snap, detailed accounts of the tunnel home's performance had spread throughout Beaverhead County and into neighboring settlements. Bradley himself, to his credit, began modifying his thinking. At Morrison's Trading Post on February 14th, he made a public statement that took considerable humility. I was wrong about Ericsson's design. Completely wrong. What he built isn't primitive. It's sophisticated engineering that most of us were too ignorant to recognize. Any man building in hard winter country should consider earth sheltering before defaulting to conventional cabin construction. By late spring of 1882, 3 families had approached Lars about helping them design earth-sheltered homes. By autumn, that number had grown to 11. And by the winter of 1883 to 1884, 14 tunnel homes, or partial earth-sheltered structures, had been constructed across Montana Territory, each one a testament to the power of ancient wisdom applied to frontier survival. By 1885, the tunnel home phenomenon had spread far beyond Beaverhead County. From Wyoming Territory to the Canadian border, earth-shelter construction became a recognized, even preferred, building technique for homesteaders facing brutal winters with limited resources. The Montana Territorial Census of 1885 documented 47 earth-shelter dwellings across 3 counties, with another 32 under construction. Agricultural extension reports from the period noted fuel efficiency improvements ranging from 650% to 820% compared to conventional log construction, with the added benefit of reduced fire risk, a critical consideration in regions where a cabin fire in January could mean death before morning. But the story of Lars Ericsson's tunnel home revealed something more profound than mere building innovation. It exposed a dangerous arrogance that had taken root in American frontier culture. The assumption that traditional knowledge from other lands was automatically inferior to American ingenuity, that primitive and sophisticated were geographic rather than technical distinctions. Lars's design wasn't Norwegian invention. It was a convergence point of earth-sheltering wisdom refined across millennia and continents. The Icelandic torfbear, turf houses that sustained families through centuries of North Atlantic winters. The Chinese Yaodong, cave dwellings housing millions across the Loess Plateau, maintaining stable temperatures in regions where summer heat topped 100 degrees Fahrenheit and winter cold dropped below zero. The Native American pit houses of the Southwest, semi-subterranean structures that predated European contact by thousands of years and solved the exact same thermal challenges Lars faced in Montana. If you found this story valuable, smash that like button and subscribe to this channel. We're documenting survival wisdom that mainstream history ignores, techniques that could save your life when modern systems fail. Comment below with where you're watching from and what traditional building methods exist in your region. Your subscription helps preserve this knowledge for the next generation. Thomas Bradley, to his lasting credit, became one of earth sheltering's most vocal advocates in Montana Territory. In an 1886 letter to the Territorial Building Commission, he wrote, "We dismissed Erickson's design as ignorant because it came from a foreigner speaking broken English. The ignorance was ours. We had mistaken unfamiliarity for primitivism and nearly cost a family their lives because of our arrogance." The Erickson Tunnel Home stood occupied until 1923, when Lars's grandson modified it with concrete reinforcement and expanded electrical service. The core structure, those 16 feet of excavated clay, that sandstone foundation, that carefully engineered ventilation shaft, remained unchanged for 42 years, outlasting dozens of conventional cabins that rotted, burned, or collapsed under snow load. In 1968, researchers from Montana State University documented the site as part of a vernacular architecture survey. The abandoned tunnel, though no longer heated, maintained an interior temperature of 54 degrees Fahrenheit, 12 degrees Celsius, when outside air measured 8 degrees Fahrenheit, minus 13 degrees Celsius, still pulling thermal stability from the earth itself, still demonstrating principles that modern building science was only beginning to rediscover under terms like passive geothermal and earth-integrated architecture. The lesson extended beyond construction techniques. It spoke to a pattern that repeated across frontier history. The reflexive dismissal of knowledge that arrived in unfamiliar packages, spoken with foreign accents, built with methods that didn't match established norms. How many other innovations died stillborn because communities lacked the humility to recognize wisdom when it appeared outside expected forms. The winter of 1882 had proven something that Beaverhead County settlers initially refused to accept. Traditional knowledge wasn't the enemy of survival. It was often survival's foundation. What they called primitive was actually sophisticated engineering, tested across generations, refined through centuries of trial and error, more rigorous than any single builder's experience. Lars Ericsson's tunnel home saved his family that brutal January. But its larger legacy was humility, the understanding that dismissing traditional knowledge as backwards often revealed not their ignorance, but ours. The earth remembers what humans forget. Sometimes survival means having the wisdom to listen. Educational and historical content. This documentary script presents historical construction techniques for informational purposes only. Any earth sheltering or construction project should comply with modern building codes, engineering standards, and local regulations. Consult licensed professionals before attempting similar construction.